Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is March 12. As we continue in our daily Bible reading, we read today of the Israelite nation pushing their way further into the land of Canaan to take over the land, to call that land their own in fulfillment of a promise made so many years earlier to Abraham, the covenant that God established with Abraham so very long ago. Now, we've seen some very unusual battle strategies already by the Israelites. When they go up against a very fortified city in Jericho, we saw the walls come tumbling down when the people shouted as one and the trumpets blew at God's command. That was pretty unusual and something certainly the people of Jericho never saw coming and certainly never expected. We saw the rout of the Israelites by Ai initially because there was sin in the camp, but then we saw an unusual battle strategy to defeat Ai, where Joshua splits his army in two and sets up an ambush that goes in and burns the city while the men are all out in the field fighting the battle. Those were some pretty interesting and entertaining battle scenes because of the unusual strategy, and you have to ask the question, why such unusual strategies being used by God? Why doesn't he just help the Israelites win the battle more forthrightly, more easily, so to speak? But it seems to be that God is making the point that as long as they trust him, as long as they obey him, even when it doesn't seem to make sense, when it's an unusual battle strategy, they will be victorious every time. And today is no exception. Now, something unusual happens at the beginning of our reading today, where the Gibeonites, who are a neighboring nation, come to Israel and want to make an agreement with them, want to make a pact with them, so that they can spare their lives. The Gibeonites put forward a ruse, as it's called, where they pretend to be travelers from a far-off nation. They make themselves look like their clothes are all worn out and their bread is all dry and moldy, and everything is done in a way to confuse Joshua and his men into believing that they are not neighbors, but have just come all this way from a far country to see God at work because they've heard all the stories of this marvelous God. Well, Joshua and his men buy their story. They seem to be a little bit suspicious at first, but then they are convinced that the Gibeonites are telling them the truth. Problem is here, Joshua never consults God. He never asks God about it, and so he makes an oath with the Gibeonites that they will be protected and they will not be destroyed by Joshua and his army. Later, Joshua and his army find out that the Gibeonites are neighbors. They should be destroying them, but because they've made an oath, they don't. Well, as time marches on, Gibeon then comes under attack. There's a confederation of 5 southern kings who all get together and they're feeling threatened by Israel. And when they find out that Israel and Gibeon are in cahoots together, and Gibeon, by the way, is a very important territory, these 5 kings go together with their armies and they decide to attack Gibeon. Gibeon, who is now in a relationship with Israel, calls out to Joshua and his men to please help them in this attack. So Joshua and his men march all night long, and God says to Joshua, "Don't worry, don't be afraid. I have already delivered them into your hand." And so the battle ensues, and Joshua and the Israelites are victorious. And as they're driving the enemies out, they need more time as the day is coming to a close and it's starting to get dark. And so Joshua calls out to God for the sun to stand still. It's not getting dark yet, of course, but he knows that they need more time. So he asks God to make the sun stand still, and God does. And then God rains down hailstones from heaven. He puts the enemy armies in confusion, and we're told by the text that more people in the army die from the hailstones and all the mishap surrounding their confusion than they do by the sword of Joshua. Why are we told this? To make sure that even we, the readers, understand that this is a battle that belongs to the Lord, that God is fighting for Israel, and that's why Israel is being successful. These 5 kings escape as their armies are being defeated. They hide in a cave, but when the Israelite army discovers this, The 5 kings are brought out to Joshua and hanged. And so a successful southern campaign is then fought where Joshua and his military men travel all through the southern part of Canaan, defeating kings and defeating their people, completely wiping them out as God had commanded Moses. And then there's a list of 31 kings that Joshua actually defeats. We're also told of a northern confederation of kings, that they were even described as numerous as the sands on the seashore. Same kind of terminology used in the promise to Abraham of his descendants being as numerous and uncountable, so to speak, as the sand on the seashore. Joshua leaves nothing undone, we're told, of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So Joshua is proving to be a great leader of God's people. God hardens the hearts of their enemies and exterminates them. And as I mentioned, 31 kings and their people are destroyed. We're told that Joshua takes the entire land, just as the Lord directed Moses, and he's going to give that land to the Israelites as their inheritance, as their territory, as their claim to this long-awaited promise made to Abraham. And once these 31 kings and their people have been defeated, and once the land is now in the possession of Joshua and his people, and once the land now starts being divided, the land has rest from war. God has been victorious again and again and again. And though sometimes people are confused and wondering, why does God seem so harsh? Why is it seemingly so unfair to all the Canaanites living in the land? We continue to be reminded that they are idolatrous people, that they are wicked people, that they have willingly chosen to turn their backs on God, and God is punishing them. And he's using Israel to do that punishing. He's using Israel to purge the land, remember? And he wants this nation to be a theocratic nation, a nation belonging to him as his treasured possession. Remember, God is a holy God. He wants his people to be a holy people, and he wants the land of Canaan, the land of promise, to be a holy nation. God still longs to keep his people together. Today, he does so through the church. He wants the church to be his people. He wants the church to be his treasured possession. He wants the church to be holy. And the question we must ask ourselves on a daily basis is, are we? Are we holy? Are we righteous in the sight of God? Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.